someone's had an affair, or multiple sex partners, that partner never says, if you had just told me you were sleeping with other people, I think I could have handled it better.
Yeah.
They never say that, because I think that...
With emotional infidelity.
Oh, gosh.
Right? How do you define when that crosses?
Right.
Is it when you're texting? Is it when you're texting instead of doing your household things? Is it when you're laughing or when you're sharing personal information? Is it when you're engaging in sexual, banter? What is that?
What is that? Is that betrayal?
Right.
Is that infidelity? Is
Right.
that in their conversation? I mean, that you're just going to have, and you're going to have to learn to get past the shame, because if there's anything that's going to reveal shame.
With between dating apps and hookup apps and imaging and deep fakes and all those kind of things, it just continues to make this an area of sometimes it trying to do long division.
Welcome to Therapist Take. We are going to talk about, is secret porn use considered infidelity? So don't go anywhere. Hi, Carrie.
Hey, Josh.
We're back.
Yay.
So we got a really good episode of what I think is one that needs to be talked about, in my opinion, because we get this question a lot, and that is pornography... It's not even really a question. It's just like it has to be encountered, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of an implied question, is secret porn use infidelity? So we're going to talk about that. But before we do that, let me just remind everybody of the typical housekeeping things, which is, if you're watching this on YouTube, please take it just a second and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And if you have subscribed to our channel, just real quickly hit the like button so that maybe it'll please the algorithms a little bit more than usual. And then if you're listening to this on the audio platform, that means we have pulled this off of our live broadcast, and I've edited it up a little bit and dropped it on the audio platform, and also re-uploaded it to YouTube. But be sure to just stop what you're doing for a second and go on over to the show, and where you can give the 5-star review and give us that 5-star review, and then come back and start listening again. And also don't forget to check the show notes in the description of the video, because we usually put resources and stuff in there, right?
Yeah.
What we're going to talk about to start out with is just, just the question that I asked at the beginning, is secret pornography use considered infidelity? And then we're going to move into how it differs or overlaps with physical infidelity or other types of infidelity, like emotional affairs and things like that, where there's usually some kind of other person that is involved or you're interacting with. We're going to navigate some of the gray areas, because I feel like there's some ambiguity in this. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the importance of transparency and the kind of, I wouldn't say it's a new reality, but just kind of the reality that of online sexuality in our culture and where we're headed with it. So that's what we're going to do.
All right.
That sounds fun enough.
Easy.
As many people know, you and I are both betrayal trauma therapists. We're both certified sex addiction therapists, which kind of throws us into that category.
Right.
Where we're working with not just people that are addicted to sex in some way or addicted to porn in some way, but also just use it compulsively or have had an affair or some form of infidelity. But one thing I hear a lot from partners is, or I hear from the person who acted out, saying that my partner says that, my secret porn use is the same to her or him as if I had a physical affair. Yeah. Are you hearing that?
Yeah,
too?
I hear that too. I think I do hear it a little bit more when it's the male who acted out in a heterosexual relationship.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. Than same-sex males. But or if if a female acted out and was in a relationship with a male. But I still hear it from partners, right? That the injury feels right, just as devastating, right, as the idea of being physically with somebody else.
So I think how would you answer that? Because I think in my mind there's the reality, like the intellectual answer, And then there's like the emotional
Yeah.
answer to
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
like where would you start?
Well, being a therapist, you usually don't try and talk people out of their feelings.
Right.
It's not helpful, right? And that's
Right.
kind of the bottom line. And that's, I think, what we're doing as mental health professionals, but we're also doing oftentimes as couples therapists, right? Is
Right.
because it's reasonable, it's probably predictable for someone to say, but I never touched anybody, right?
Right.
True, factual. But I don't know that that statement is well, you need to clarify if that did happen, right? It's an important, I guess, piece of information, but I don't know that it necessarily changes
Right.
the wound, right? The wound exists, right? And so saying I didn't touch anybody, but I did keep, my porn use secret, while maybe someone's glad that there's not the physical infidelity, they're also still devastated,
Sure.
right, by the secrecy.
100%. You said that you don't want to talk people out of their feelings, right? I think from a therapist, the one reason why that's I think is really important for us is because that's often what the
Right.
partners are trying to do,
Right.
in just kind of a self-preservation
Yeah, yeah.
effort, not any kind of sinister way. I'm not saying that couldn't happen, but most of the time it's just they've been caught and they're deer in the headlights,
Right.
and
Right.
and that's it's a form of gaslighting, for sure.
Yeah,
Because it's like I'm saying you shouldn't feel the way you feel,
Right,
as a way of trying to dodge a bullet,
Right.
basically, right?
right.
But I do think like there is an intellectual piece that has to be covered.
I agree.
But it's not in the beginning or the very beginning, right?
Well, I think some version of it is, right? Like, have you been, sexual with somebody else?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That-
Well, what I mean is that, for example, it is different. It's not the same, right? I'm not gonna say that to a partner on day one, like, and just say like, because it really doesn't even matter, because what matters is that they feel the feeling of betrayal, and that's what I try to when I'm working with the person who is the one keeping the secret or kept a secret that's been caught or discovered. That's usually what I tell them is that like you can call it infidelity or not infidelity, but it generated a feeling of betrayal in your partner, and you're gonna have to own that, acknowledge that.
Sure.
So it might not look like a traditional, what we've typically thought of for hundreds of years, I guess, of infidelity.
Yeah, yeah.
Because online infidelity is a little bit more nuanced, right? I mean, it's a baby in comparison
Yes,
to
sure.
infidelity in relationships.
Right, right.
But the reality is it's not the same, but it could still be just as damaging.
Yeah, and
harmful.
I'm really glad too
yeah.
that you're kind of pointing out that there's a process in this,
Yeah,
right? And I think that's something
Right.
too that when you're at that point of discovery or whatever, the idea that there's first let's do this and then next let's do this, like that just seems really hard to get a grasp on. And that's
Right.
part of the reason people come to see a therapist is to say, hey, like let's start here,
Right.
and then we'll go here and keep going from there.
Yeah. I also think too, like, I think partners, I think they know it's not the same, but how insulting is it if for me to feel betrayed by you through the secrecy and deception, and then you say, well, it's not the same as, and I'm supposed to agree with you?
Right.
You know what I'm
Right,
saying?
right.
Okay, I mean, we all know it's not the same, but it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt
Right.
in bad and different ways.
Right.
And you and I can attest too that we've had people whose relationships didn't recover after
Right.
Discovery of pornography use, and some who after discovery of a physical affair did recover.
Right.
Right. So it is not an indicator of success and
Outcome.
recovery. Right.
I think that's true too.
The way I see it is that and this is anecdotal, from just seeing so many people over the years that have been dealing with this. When a partner comes in and I would say if I were to put a number to it, 90% of the time or 95% of the time, that when it's pornography only betrayal, I will often hear them say, if you had just told me about it, I think I could have handled it better. Not once have I heard that come from the mouth of somebody whose partner cheated on them with another person. Not one time, because it doesn't make any sense, right? Like, why would I say that? And I think what that points to for me is that it's not really the pornography use that creates the betrayal trauma. It's the secrecy and deception around the pornography use. And so if you had just told me about it, I think I could have handled it better. But when someone's had an affair, or multiple sex partners, that partner never says, if you had just told me you were sleeping with other people, I think I could have handled it better.
Yeah.
They never say that, because I think that in that sense, the actual act of betrayal, the act itself, the sexual act, creates the injury, and then the secrecy and deception just drives it deeper.
Yeah.
Whereas with pornography, it's the secrecy and deception that creates the injury, not the actual act, sexual act.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think both of them, in both instances, people experience broken trust.
Right.
Right. But I think that the other, they're, again, and this is kind of point two, I guess, where it's similar and different, right? The overlap, right, is that it's broken trust, and you kept me out of something that was significant, something significant that was going on with you that also could have reflected about what was going on with us.
Right.
And you didn't give me any choice.
Yes.
Because you made these secret choices. So that's the part, I think, whether it's when it's a pornography secret or an actual physical or emotional secret, I think that those are the parts that do that overlap.
Right. Yeah. And so, like, I just want a disclaimer too, that anybody listening to this, that you might be hearing me say that and be like, I completely disagree. The thinking about the act of pornography use also created the injury for me, discovering that.
Sure.
And I have clients that's happened to. I'm just saying, like, I think that would, from my experience anyways, that would put you in the minority. So, and I don't think that makes you abnormal in any way. Just, I do think it can happen. I just, from my experience of working with people, it's usually, they usually make that statement,
Yeah, I hear it too. I do hear it most of the time too.
Yeah. So, so there are some differences there, and there's some obvious differences too. But then there are, like, some gray areas and some ambiguity, right? And I think we should address that, because we've talked a lot about, like, just the ambiguity of pornography in general, and there's that common quote from that famous Supreme Court case with Chief Justice Potter Stewart, where he said, like, I can't tell you, I can't define pornography, but I can tell you it when I see it.
I know it
when I see it. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's how you. And so, and when I'm talked to individuals and couples about that, I'm like, for at some point, it's pornography for everybody. And every individual and couple needs to define for themselves where it starts.
Sure.
And that'll be different for everybody. But there's also, like, when it comes to online sexuality and online betrayal, like, really kind of defining, like, what is it and what isn't it? At what point is it, like, more than betrayal through secrecy and deception? Now we're in the arena of, no, like, you were cheating on me with somebody else, right?
Yeah, I think the interaction level is a way that it starts to graduate. Money involved. Starts to graduate.
The exchange of money.
Exchange of money. The potential sharing of identity and location, right? Because now the anonymity, right, which is a big part of pornography use, right? And a big part that makes people more at risk for being compulsive with pornography use. When you start, giving up your anonymity by exchanging money or location or chats or, seeing your face.
And you can do that just by paying for porn, or just, like, that doesn't necessarily have to be through webcams and stuff like that, which is, I think, where a lot of people typically think of
money
exchanging money, through that. But no, I mean, people can purchase pornography.
Sure. Yeah. And so, where is that in this black, white, and gray area, right?
Yeah. And then you know, again, there's a point, just like with defining what pornography is. There's a point where it's betrayal and cheating and infidelity in the sense that everybody thinks of it, right? Like where
Right.
everybody's going to say that is cheating,
Right.
you know. But at what point it starts for you, like when
Yeah.
it comes to this kind of nuanced online thing, that's usually where it starts these days.
Yes. Yes.
When would it cross that threshold?
And
And I think that's
that's,
for every couple to
I think it is too, because
decide.
let's even make that, take this continuum, right? With emotional infidelity,
Oh gosh.
right? How do you define
So
when that
right.
crosses? Is it when you're texting? Is it when you're texting instead of doing your household
Yeah.
things? Is it when you're laughing or when you're sharing personal information? Is it when you're engaging in sexual, banter? What is that, right?
Yeah. How would you define emotional affair? Like what are just for you? And I'm not saying that anybody listening to this has to adopt our perspective here, but how do you measure it? Like where
That's
I
hard.
would say that's an emotional affair. Like if you're working with a client and they're like wondering, like, is this an emotional affair? Like what would you be
Well, I
looking
think
for?
one thing that would be clear would be if you told somebody else you loved them.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, to me, that's the high end of that continuum.
Yeah. It
Pretty
was
clear,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Making plans to be together,
Yeah.
right? Telling each other. I think it starts to become it also when you're starting to maybe disparage your spouse or your partner
Yeah.
to somebody else, and the other one maybe doing the same or encouraging that.
Yeah.
That's dishonoring at
Yeah.
minimum, right? And I think you could argue that that crosses the line. And so
Right.
now you've broken our clear agreement of commitment to each other, right?
And just a side note for any partners out there that are considering doing a therapeutic disclosure, which is a therapeutic process we go through
Right.
with people to rid the relationship of secrets. Part of that disclosure needs to be disparaging
Yes.
comments. Like,
Right.
did you say disparaging things about me to this person or to people or when you were engaging in this secret relationship?
Communication,
Right.
yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, this has come up a lot too. Just
Yeah.
this whole emotional affair. But before I get into my perspective, does the word affair mean something different to you than infidelity?
I think affair still has me. Immediately, I think of that movie, right? An Affair to Remember. Ever see that old movie?
No.
It's beautiful, by the way. I think of affair maybe as being, first of all, I think it indicates to me that there's a marriage,
Okay.
right? An affair. Infidelity, I think, can happen in any committed relationship, perhaps. Affair to me, I don't know, somehow delineates,
Yeah.
yes, we're a married couple. I also think that it almost sounds more romantic. Right? Again, I'm just giving impressions.
Sounds relational.
Right? Relational. Yeah.
Yes, and the thing that throws me a little bit in terms of how I think about it is the word affair. So I think of an exchange. So like if it's one-sided, so I actually think if somebody goes up to another person and says I love you, I actually don't think that's an emotional affair. That is definitely an unhealthy attachment, and it is a form of emotional betrayal. But if the other person doesn't know what's going on,
They're not voluntarily
right, to me
engaging.
that's what it
That's how
would
those are
classify
different.
it for me.
Okay.
Like I'm looking for does the other person know, or are they involved in
Okay.
this?
Okay.
And if they are involved, then I say that's an emotional affair. If they're not involved, it's not an affair. It's unhealthy attachment and emotional
Which
betrayal.
is a betrayal.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely betrayal
Yeah. Yeah.
for sure. But again, potatoes,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
To the person
right.
who
The
it's happening
secrets,
to.
again, what we
Right.
talked about before, right? There's still secret keeping.
Yeah. I think it's especially important for the person that has committed the act, because as they're trying to determine what's happening to them, what's going on for
Right.
them, and how they're going to intervene, we try to get the right language to it.
Yes. Language makes a big difference.
100,
Sure.
yeah, of course. Like, and it's also nuanced to the individual, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's an old show that I watched once where this couple got in a fight because she called him stupid, and then after the fight, he did. I wish I could find it. I could use this as an example of clients. It's a really good job of how, when you come back to the table to talk about the argument. You don't try to pick up where you left off. You talk about what was happening to you. And he came back and he was like, told a story about why the word stupid is so triggering for him. And there's trauma and there's history, right? And then because it's a comedy, she's like, so if I had called you dumb, or she said, if I had called you a moron, that'd been okay. And he goes, oh yeah, I'm perfectly fine with moron, but that is not true. It's not untrue, right? I mean, moron, it wasn't the language that was used that is connected to his trauma.
Right.
And so that's very possible that you could say something very similar and I don't react.
Right.
So language definitely does matter.
Well, and that's kind of what you're moving people to in this point is that there is a lot of gray area, but part of the healing process is to start making it a little less gray through language, teasing apart, exploring, noticing, right, what those things mean to you.
Giving a name to
giving
it
a name
helps
to it, right?
feel a little more in control.
Sure, and then it helps you to communicate that to the other person in your relationship. I mean, especially if you're trying to, heal and stay together in this relationship,
Right.
you're going to need to do this work, right? Rather than sweep it under the rug or ignore the pain.
So I think that when it comes to navigating the ambiguity, what it boils down to is being open with your communication about it. So going back to what the partner says, if you had just talked to me about this, told me about your struggle,
Right.
I think I could have handled this much differently. Think about the couple that talks about pornography long before their relationship has entered into the committed phase,
Right.
or long before they get married, and they've talked about the struggle, and then they've had conversations about, okay, like when is it not okay for us? Like when, first of all, when does it become pornography? When does this become betrayal, right? And those are the types of conversations that I think we're scared to have, probably largely because of shame and a number of other reasons, I'm sure.
And we don't want to hurt most people don't want to hurt their partners, right?
Right.
And so if you say this is what is pornography and this is where it's betrayal, and it's easier, you got it.
Right.
Right. But do you really agree? And to
Yeah.
have the courage.
Yeah, that's a really important point. You have to have, when you said, like, do you really agree? Or are you just saying you agree because you want
to move on? This is too stressful. This
right.
is difficult.
Painful. What's it called when you, the expression of going along to get along.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you have that personality where I don't want to poke the bear, but
right.
if you, especially with something like that, if you don't completely agree, you got to talk about what you don't completely agree with or what you're confused about, so that you see what wiggle room exists between the two of you.
Well, and I think though there'd be, because we work with people at all stages, right? Before anything has happened and after. Talking about what is pornography, what's betrayal, boy, that sounds maybe on the surface like, oh yeah, I could talk about that. But you start exploring it, and it's going to go back to core experiences around sexuality and physicality and pleasure and ruthlessness and communication and all those things that are part of a human's sexual development, right from the moment they're conceived.
Sure.
And so it's a pretty complex, open-ended discussion, really. And it's one, even if you are in a relationship and have been in for a long time, you can need to revisit.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't think you close the door. I don't know that you define it, which is kind of probably the last point too. With the world that we're in and technology, right? Did you ever believe you'd have to say, if you send naked pictures of yourself to somebody else, that's not okay? Right? Because this wasn't the world that we grew up in.
I don't want people that's watching or listening to this to think I'm making light of their situation, but it's laughing at the absurdity of what, like, you're right, like did we ever would never have imagined
having that conversation,
right.
Having to set that limit and say that out loud.
Like I've had that talk with my kids, and they looked at me like I was stupid, and I was offended, and then they looked at me like I was a moron. and I wasn't
Moron.
offended.
No, you weren't offended.
But you're right. Like, and so in moving into that fourth point,
Yeah.
online sexuality isn't going anywhere.
No, it's
right?
only going to grow.
So,
Yeah.
like, where's this going? You
Right.
think?
Right. Oh, I think it's going to become more muddy. There's going to be more apps. There's going to be more,
Mm-hmm.
probably even technology will make it even easier to keep it secret.
Right.
But of course, then technology will make it even easier to reveal the secret.
Sure.
So, but yeah, I think, with between dating apps and hookup apps and, imaging and deep fakes and all those kind of things, it just
Right.
continues to make this an area of, sometimes it's like trying to do long division in your head. You just lose track.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the porn industry, the sex industry in general, the sex toy industry. I mean, they're all getting on board with technology because
Yeah.
it's just the
The
way
way
we're
it is.
evolving, right? And so, if there's a couple, if there's a couple that doesn't adhere to like traditional Judeo-Christian norms,
Right.
about pornography, and they decide like that for them that it's not a concern. What about virtual
Right.
reality?
Right.
What about I think in one of the technical word for it with the sex toy industry is teledildonics,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Where they are using technology with sex toys to match whatever porn you're watching,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it's to try to make the experience feel
Even more
more
real.
real to you. Well, what is that? Is that betrayal? Is
Right.
that infidelity? Is
Right.
that in their conversation? I mean, that you're just going to have, and you're going to have to learn to get past the shame, because if there's anything that's going to reveal shame is like when you have to have a real conversation about sex and sexuality with your partner, and you're like, I don't want to, and you're like, why? Well, you're a grown person. Like, why don't you? Like, why is
Yeah.
this hard? Right? It's
Right.
because of shame.
Right. And how old do you feel in that? Are you
Right.
feeling the same age as the kid
Yeah.
that looked
I
at you
don't
and said,
wanna.
"Why do people do that?"
Don't make me do this. I don't want
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Can't we
Right.
just like not and say it? That's what my dad would always say. Can't we not say we did? You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I mean, you're gonna have to learn to get past your shame, realize that you're a
Yes.
grown person, and as a grown up, shouldn't you be able to have these very real conversations about sexuality with the person that you're closest to?
Right.
Right.
But I think too that what this also is revealing is something that's really important when it comes to, individual sex and couples sex. I don't just mean sexuality. Is there is a difference between secrecy and privacy, right? And so when we're talking
Yes.
about sitting down and having conversations about how do you define what's pornography and what's not, how do you define what's betrayal and what's not, this doesn't mean that you're going to abdicate all privacy, right? But it's enough of a discussion so that there's clarity, right? That the commitment that you're making to each other is clear, and people can't sidestep, and people can't say, "Oh, I thought that as long as I didn't spend money, it was okay. I thought as long as I didn't have feelings for anybody, it was okay." It doesn't mean that you have to give up and share every single bit of your, fantasy world or your, thoughts growing up or anything like that. But
Yeah.
secrecy is what makes people sick, right? We say
Yeah.
this all the time, especially when we're working with people with compulsive behavior. And so
What's
that's
the difference?
between privacy and secrecy.
Yeah. I just.
I always joke and say privacy is we all know what people do in the bathroom, right? It's not a secret, right? But you don't have to go watch.
You don't have to go in there
Yeah,
and watch,
uh-huh,
right?
yeah.
That's good. I use a less disgusting
Yeah,
metaphor.
okay, thanks. Good. I'm glad I'm more disgusting than you, Josh.
No, I use like the diary metaphor. It's like I tell like my wife has a stack of. I just saw them the other day as I was cleaning our bedroom, and she has a stack of diaries from over the years. I've never cracked one open ever, and don't like like knight me here as like some kind of saint, because also a little afraid of what I would read. It's quite easy for me to not. Also too,
Never mind.
I'm having trouble cracking open the book I've been reading for a year, so I'm probably not going to read her journal.
Yeah, true.
But I think what's important is, yes, I think I really don't think she would be bothered if I asked to read one, she'd probably let me read it. She'd be bothered if I read it in secret.
Yeah.
Right. But because it's her private space, and what's important, there could be secrets in those diaries,
Yeah,
right?
could be.
And if I were to find that out, that'd be betrayal. But what's important for the relationship is that I know the diary exists. I know they exist, but I don't get to know what's in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? And
Sure.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's fair because we all need that space.
Right. So I think if we have this kind of discussion, I do think it helps make the gray area a little bit, I guess, less scary or less
Right.
overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
going in these discussions saying that, you know, really understanding the heart of secrecy, and, you know, whether it's a sexual betrayal or a financial betrayal or an emotional betrayal, it's usually exactly what you said, Josh, that people will say, if they had just told me,
Right.
if they had just told me that this had happened to them,
Yeah.
if they just told me they were struggling with this.
You just told me that diary existed. Right.
That's why she's leaving them out.
When I found it, I wouldn't have read it.
That's why your wife's leaving them out.
No,
right?
but you're right.
Right.
And I think, you know, kind of going back to something you said earlier, is that, you know, you start making assumptions about what is okay with your partner. That's just mental gymnastics.
Yes.
That's all that is.
Yeah.
Like, I think if you're really being honest with yourself, and you're sitting there having a dialogue with yourself, and you're going, I think she would be okay with this. Like, come on.
Right.
Like,
right.
why would you even ask yourself that question and answer it without talking to her if that were actually
Right.
the truth?
Right.
Which kind of lends to probably one of the best expressions ever created is when you assume
Right. Right.
you make an ass out of you and me. Or you can do the Samuel L. Jackson version.
Oh, what's that?
When you make an assumption, you make an ass out of you and umption. You gotta picture Samuel L. Jackson doing
Okay,
it.
I
It was
do.
on The Long Kiss Goodnight.
He
movie.
probably does it really well.
Yeah, his character in The Long Kiss Goodnight did. Yeah. Well, what are you saying? You didn't like my Samuel L. Jackson
That Samuel
impression?
L. Jackson probably does Samuel L. Jackson better than Josh
Yeah.
Nichols.
Well, I know that, you know, there's so many different things we could talk about. One thing that we probably that came up at the very beginning is a good point that you made is that we're probably thinking, we are reflecting on like heteronormative couples.
Yes.
Where the guy is the one that has been discovered watching pornography, which
Right.
is more, you know, likely because I don't think women do it as much. I do think the research is showing there's a growing number of women
Yes.
watching
Right.
pornography. Now, how many of them are keeping it secret? I mean, I have no clue.
I don't know the data on that either.
Yeah,
Huh.
I have absolutely. It wouldn't surprise me if it's a lot because I think women feel much more shame
Sure.
because they're not supposed to do it.
Right. It's
you know?
not so culturally, socially
Right.
sanctioned as much.
Yeah.
Right.
It's usually associated with men. So
Sure. No, but I'm glad you brought us back to that point.
Yeah.
But there is some difference, right? When it's
Yeah, we
you
should
know a
probably-
same-sex relationship, or it's you know the secret keeping has been on the female side of a heterosexual relationship.
yeah, we should make a note to do an episode on how, you know, betrayal trauma and compulsive sexuality look different in some of these different
Yeah. Relationship
less
types.
common relationships, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I still think at the core of it, let's even go broader and say not in a romantic. When you find out that someone that you care about is kept a secret, it just hurts. You feel left out, right?
Yeah.
You feel like someone didn't trust you with something. I think we all can relate to that feeling.
Yeah, I agree. So anyway, you know, we've kind of reached the end of our episode, and for people listening to this, you know, please, you know, go get help if you're dealing with betrayal trauma. But there's also a lot of great resources that I'll make sure to put in the show notes and in the description of the video. It's not in there yet. If you're watching this live, it's not in there yet, but I'll re-upload this. But one book I do want to mention before we go, and we actually had the pleasure of interviewing this person years ago when we first started doing live broadcasts, which is Rob Weiss's book, Always Turned On.
Yeah.
I will put a link to that. I will warn you, it's like kind of, like some things, and he talks about some things in there that even I, at the time that he wrote it, hadn't really thought about, you know, and learn some things I haven't learned. And the reason I'm saying that is I could see someone that might, if you're a sex addict or a porn addict, I don't want you to get ideas, And so if you're watching this and you're battling sex addiction or porn addiction, and you're in a relationship, like consult with your sponsor before you, before and really any material that you
Yeah, I agree.
get. Like, don't just go online and just start plucking things off the internet.
Yeah.
Get it from a reliable source. Whether it's your therapist or your sponsor,
Your
even
group.
your church community.
Your group.
You're right.
Yeah, recovery groups.
But I will put a link to that, and because I really think that it is a book that needed to be written, and Rob was perfect for writing it.
He is.
So,
I agree.
all right, well, we healed the world,
We did
and
it.
then it's always weird if from one week to the next it gets unhealthy again,
It's
and we
crazy.
have to do
We have
another
to
episode.
come back. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and not next week, but I think in 2 weeks we're having Kelly Roberts come back on, Dr. Roberts, and we're going to talk about our mental and emotional well-being and how that's related to nature. So I think this will be a really good
Perfect
episode.
time in the spring.
Yeah, I love talking to her too.
Me too.
By the way.
Me too.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here.